day, ladies and gentlemen. It's Eric Coffin. I'm here at the May 2024 Mental Investors Forum in Vancouver. I'm here with Sharyn Alexander. She's the president of Sun Summit Minerals. Sun Summit is this stock I've owned for a long time. The former CEO and I are pretty close friends. But I want to talk about the new Sun Summit. I mean, the company went through some pretty big reorganization here a little while ago. Stock was consolidated. There was a $2.5 million financing completed. I happen to know who a lot of the buyers are in the new financing, though I'm not going to name them, but suffice it to say they're very high net worth people with a lot of experience investing in this industry. They aren't the type of people that just turn around and blow it out after 4 months. So I'm very comfortable. The stock, which is tightened up a lot because of the consolidation, is going to stay that way for the foreseeable future. All of this financing and the reorganization was in aid of the acquisition of the JD project. JD is a really, really exciting looking project. It's up in the Lawyers area. It's an area I've got some familiarity with. My late brother worked up there for 3 or 4 seasons. I know a bunch of the guys that used to work up there. That some of whom I know have come back on this financing because they love the area. But JD's I think been through a few hands. I think because, and again, it's guys that I know. The vendors are retired geos, and they're pretty tough on the terms. But I found it interesting that they did a deal with Sun Summit rather than the neighbors. The neighbors being Thesis Gold, who I have no doubt wanted the project, but I think the vendors who are, after all, technical, they kind of like the approach and the way that you guys were going to go after and try to advance the project. I think that's really what got you the project.
Yeah, it was a competitive process to negotiate the option terms for JD. And it was, there were several groups. We don't know all the groups that were involved, but at the end of the day, the vendors really wanted to see this project advance. They didn't want it added just to someone's project portfolio and, sit around. They really wanted to see it drilled and advanced, turned to a resource and become something. And so our technical advisor, Christopher Leslie, he had worked the project in the 2010s. They had done a lot of work there. And so he has boots on ground experience already. He put together a really solid exploration plan for the first few years. He also knew the vendors personally. And so I think that really set us apart from a lot of the other groups and operators that were negotiating for the project. And that's ultimately what led us to get the option.
Now, JD is, one thing about this area, Lawyers is, I won't bore you with the historical details, but, Lawyers was a, camp that was really, really active, 70s, 80s. There's actually a mine up in the area. As it turned out, the Chene mine turned out to be not as big as everybody thought it would be. But when the new group of, new generation of geos went back and kind of, thought about it and reordered what they thought the model was and what they thought the targets were. As it turns out, it's actually a hell of a lot bigger than they thought it was back in the day. It's just a different style of thing. Those high grade zones from the original mine are still there, but you have these much bigger bulk tonnage zones. And the neighbor just put out a resource on, it's kind of two projects that kind of, I guess, bookend, you could say, JD, 4.7 million ounces. That's a pretty big resource. You don't see those every day, and the grade's good for bulk tonnage. Mm-hmm. JD, you're sort of starting, in a sense, you're sort of starting where those guys are starting a few years back, where you've got these high grade zones. There may or may not be bulk tonnage, but one thing I want to touch on is the first thing you guys are doing is pulling together all the historic stuff. Getting it all in databases, getting it into 3D, and so you're able to kind of layer it and really start putting these different surveys together. There's way more target there than it looked like there was originally.
Definitely. There's quite a bit of historic data, and we did have quite a lot of digital data to begin with from the drilling. Right. What we found through the data compilation review and looking through old assessment reports and internal reports is that a lot of this data had not yet even been digitized. And so our last news release discussed kind of the upside potential of particularly along the Finn to Creek trend,
Right.
when we really found we already knew that there were some great rock samples and soil anomalies in this area, but when we pulled all the data together, we were even surprised by how prospective this whole area looked. And you're right in terms of how Thesis got started with Ranch and now they have the bingo zone as well.
Right.
They started pretty early stage exploration, and now they're developing into resource and looking more, advanced exploration. I think really at JD we have the chance to do that as well, is to really advance the projects rapidly, maybe get to a resource stage fairly quickly, and really advance the project in a quick succession.
Yeah, because you had to really look at the map in the last release a couple of times to kind of get your head around the fact that this trend, this corridor of different targets, it's 4.5 kilometers. I mean, the scale is bigger than I thought it was. But what interests me, I mean, you've got, the Finn zone kind of anchors one end of it, and it's had like a ton of drill holes because everybody just went back, as explorers will do, drill the same stuff over and over again, which I know you don't intend to do.
Mm-hmm.
But what was really interesting to me was some of these newer targets that you described in the last release. Some of them have 2 or 3 drill holes, some of them have no drill holes.
Exactly.
And they're very, very strong looking anomalies, really good rock samples, but for whatever reason nobody put drill holes in them.
Yeah, I think a lot of the operators in the areas, at least in the 90s and the late 90s, they pulled out. They couldn't raise money. The company ceased to exist after that. And then again in the 2010s and like 2014, 15, things weren't so good. So a lot of these companies pulled out just because they couldn't raise the money. They couldn't get funded. It wasn't so much that they weren't liking what they were finding. What we're seeing in some of these geochemical anomalies, as you mentioned, they're coincident. So right on top of the soil anomalies, we have all these great rock samples. So we know that's in place, that they haven't been transported. They're very easy, kind of low-hanging fruit drill targets that we can just go in there. They're very high potential drill targets. That's not to say that we're going to drill all of them. But as we figure out the geochemistry, and then there's also geophysics in the area, we'll be delineating some drill targets and prioritizing those and figure out what we're going to do this summer. We have a lot of drilling that we could do, and right now it's just figuring out where to drill first.
Right. So what's the game plan on the ground for this summer?
So in earlier in the year, we had a few news releases out over talking about the potential targets around the Finn zone, stepping out, seeing along strike how big the system could be. The Creek zone is a big target for us. Only 20 drill holes, really high grades, step out drilling at Creek. And then as well, some of these Schmidt zone, Wolf zone, some of these zones where we're seeing the geochemical anomalies, that would be great to put some drilling in those areas. We're doing IP geophysics at Creek, so that'll help kind of guide where the mineralization is and what's controlling mineralization. And then of course, just mapping, prospecting, more soil sampling. So of course, it's budget dependent. You've mentioned we just finished our private placement. We raised 2.5 million, so that we're fully funded for exploration. But of course, there's way more targets and way more, drilling that we'd like to do as well. This really is going to set us up we're going to have a busy few years.
Yeah, it's a great looking project. Like I said, much tighter structure. This is the kind of project you can get boomer drill holes from. It's also the kind of project I suspect, just given what's going on in the neighbors' projects, we're probably also going to find out that there's more bulk tonnage potential here, although I'm quite happy to see them drilling more 20 meters to 10 gram holes. I remember you did mention in your presentation, however, that a lot of the historic drilling, because they were drilling for high grade, so, sample the structure, but not sample anything in between. And I think what the neighbors changed when they started working on it was recognizing there wasn't, in fact, a disseminated aspect to it. Definitely. They started just assaying everything top to bottom, and I assume that's your plan too. It's just assay everything.
Yeah, we already know through some of the holes that have been continuously sampled that the mineralization obviously doesn't stop after the vein. These high grade veins and structures are hosted within kind of larger, broader zones of still very high grade or more disseminated bulk tonnage grades. So definitely, we're going to be continuously sampling the whole hole, and this would add gold mineralization just through assaying the whole hole, but also give us a better handle what the different styles of mineralization, what's controlling mineralization, and we'll be able to target future drill holes from that as well.
Okay. Will you be doing resampling on the? I mean, I don't know what kind of shape. I don't know how much the old core is even there, or what kind of shape it's in.
It's an interesting story. The core from the 80s and 90s was actually dumped into a big pit.
Okay.
At the late 90s, the government came in and did a cleanup. And so part of that remediation of the site was to take all the core and just dispose of it. So unfortunately, we have all the drill logs, we have all the assay certificates. We do not have any of the core. We do have the core from the 2010s onwards. So 2012, 2013, we do have that core.
Okay.
And so definitely it'll be relogging, maybe some resampling. And then as well, we have Chris Leslie, who's been on site. And so yeah, it's unfortunate we don't have the core, but it's not going to hinder us. Like, it's a lot of exploration upside without so much risk, is having those drill holes. We know where they are, we know what they graded, and we know what kind of rocks were there.
Right. Sounds great. I mean, it's going to be a very active summer, lots of news, and I'm pretty sure lots of high-grade drill intercepts on the way. I mean, I wrote a not inconsiderable check in the last placement because I do like high-grade drill holes, and I think we'll see some from Sun Summit. Sun Summit, SMN on the venture, SMREF QB, I think is a
Yes,
Q. Yeah,
QB.
QB. Thanks, Sharyn Alexander, President, for coming along and giving us a story.
Thanks, Eric.